speak with you. This meeting is being recorded. So to ask questions, you will click on the Q&A box and type those in. I will give them to David when he takes questions. We are recording today, as she just said. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow, generally 24 hours after the class. David will be discussing azaleas and rhododendron today. For anyone attending outside of our region, we are so glad to have you. Just want to let you know that the timing and advice that we give is for Zone 7 here in Northern Virginia. All right, David, I welcome you to get started.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, Kristen, for sitting in today. So, Sally, a lot of you might know Sally's typically hosting the show, but she's taking a little needed time off, some nice, fun time off. And Kristen and I get to work together every day. We sit just a couple cubicles apart from each other, but Kristen's that nice, friendly voice that sometimes you hear on the other end of the phone, helping us in so many different ways. And I'm so glad you're here helping us out today.
Glad to be here.
Great. So we're talking about azaleas and rhododendrons today. To me, that's pretty much synonymous with spring for any of us that live here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region, right? This is it. You go into April, and when you think spring, immediately everybody thinks azaleas, rhododendrons, dogwoods, redbuds. We're right on the cusp of all that happening. We did have that chill the other night, which set us back a little chilly today, but it is all on table. It's all starting right now. So we're going to talk about this group of plants in some detail today. Let's try to stay focused on that because it really is such an important, invaluable part of our landscapes. As always, I do want to take questions from you. I like to make this more conversational and a dialogue. So you'll put those comments, ideas, questions you might have into the chat box. I'm going to take a little question break about halfway through when we finish discussing the pruning, and then we'll take some more questions at the end. So please stick with us. Don't hesitate to send your questions in there because, like I said, I like this to be interactive and share ideas and learn from each other. So with that, I think we're pretty much ready to go ahead and get started with our first slide. So azaleas and rhododendrons. Again, this is at our Fair Oaks Nursery. Just give you an idea of the selection on these plants that are out there. There are over 10,000 different registered varieties of azaleas. So yes, a lot of people obsess on this group of plants, and why not? When you get this just proliferation of color, it comes at a time of year when we desperately need it after being locked inside all winter long. And this really announces that arrival of spring. Also, this group of plants really flourishes for us here in the Mid-Atlantic region. Not only is it really versatile in color, size, and sun-shade conditions, it just checks a lot of these boxes. Many of them are evergreen, some are deciduous. We'll talk about that. But they're easy to grow, and they just kind of flourish in our environment. So yes, this is really the kind of idea that we want out there. So we have a great selection of them in stock. We're going to just talk about some of those 10,000 that are out there. We don't have time to talk about all of them. But again, this is a really big, diverse group of plants. And so let's see, continue on from here. So rhododendrons or azaleas, they are a member of the heath family. And I'm going to go a little beyond just azaleas and rhododendrons today. I will be talking about other members of this really important family. As you can see there, if you take the big picture, there's over 4,000 different species of these plants and worldwide distribution. So we have several that are native to our area, but a lot of the evergreen ones, the types that we use in our landscape, often rely on some of their Asian cousins. So they're predominant throughout most parts of the whole region of Asia, India, and so on. And they extend over here throughout North America as well. And a lot of these get hybridized and mixed up and everything. So again, it's an important group of plants. And we'll talk about and start to see the similarities within them. So this includes plants like the rhododendron that you see in our picture, Kalmia, mountain laurel, vaccinium, blueberries, Echinanthus, leucothely, Pieris japonica, heath, sourwood. So again, these are an important and really, really valuable members to our landscape, and we're going to kind of look at all of them. So try and decide what is a rhododendron. The differences between a rhododendron and azalea, they're very, they're sometimes difficult to separate out. They are both in the same genus, meaning they're in the same genera of azaleas and rhododendrons are in that genus, but the ones that we call azaleas are sometimes subdivided out or considered a subspecies. Rhododendrons typically have the larger, thicker leaf in there, the larger blooms like you see in here, and oftentimes their flowers form in clusters or trusses of blooms. But the thing that's important is all these plants have a very similar kind of their care, their management, pest issues, all the stuff, the growing conditions, they're all very, very, very similar because again, they have this close relationship to each other. So this is that rhododendron, just giving you an idea of what that looks like in full bloom. I don't know the exact variety on this one. I'm making a guess. I think this is a very old specimen of Yaku Princess, would be my first guess on it, because they normally stay much smaller or lower than this one does. But I believe this one's just had a lot of time to grow and in an ideal, perfect location. So where they do their very best is this kind of understory environment. If you took this plant and put it into full dense shade where it gets like no sunlight, it grows, but it's thin and sparse and it doesn't have this profusion of flowers. If you take this same plant and put it out into the full sun, it's tight, compact, prolific in blooms, but a lot of times you start to see leaf scorch and yellowing foliage and signs of stress from that. So where they do their very best is this kind of partial shade where they get really bright indirect light or filtered light kind of on the edge of a forest. Again, an adaptable plant. The other thing you'll find within this group of plants is drainage is really critical to them. They like that moist but well-drained soil condition that sometimes is very hard for us to find where we are here locally, because sometimes the density of our clay that's dense and compact and doesn't drain well can create a lot of issues with it. So just for starters, we want to make sure that we have this sited correctly where we have that kind of half sun, half shade or bright indirect light. Again, they'll adapt to all extremes, and we want to try to create those conditions, that moist but well-drained environment that's there. And again, these come in a range of colors. That's where I brought in over my shoulder here. You can see kind of a deep red in there, bright red, give you an idea there. There are even yellows. They're a little bit hard to find, whites, pinks, and combinations of all the above that's in there in a range of different sizes. Also, some of these different bloom times, we have some very early blooming ones called PJM that have almost finished their bloom cycle. They come out real early in the season. Now, azaleas, like I said, close relatives, same growing conditions, and they are actually rhododendrons also. They're in the same group of plants, but they tend to be smaller leaves, smaller flowers, somewhat smaller plants, and come in every color and every size and shape that's imaginable. So these, you'll just see them throughout the entire region, start flowering even now. Some of the very early bloomers are coming to bloom now, early April, but they continue through April. Some of them bloom into May, some of them even flower into June. So again, all these azaleas and rhododendrons, you can have a sequence of blooms that will carry us through the next few weeks in there. So these are some mature ones. I don't even know the varietal names on these. I'm guessing that pink one in the center here, that could be a Mother's Day or a tradition or something like that. But again, you get bright reds like Hino Crimson that's out there. And so a lot of times people like to purchase these when they're in flower. So it gives us an opportunity to sort of judge the colors and kind of come up with the ideal combination, which is always a lot of fun. This is one, I took this pictures in my own front yard. This is a variety, it's called Chinzan. I selected this one for a couple of reasons. One, because it stays very low. The particular location where I'm growing it, I've had them in there for probably 7 years now, and they are still less than 18 inches tall. So I selected Chinzan because it's growing under some very low windows. I needed a low grower. It will spread out, but this is a low spreader type. And you can see there, this doesn't flower until about early or mid-June. So it's also a very late bloomer that's in there. And it has nice evergreen foliage that's on there. So this is just one to give you an idea of the versatility of these plants that you're looking for. So regardless of what your situation is, low and wide or big and bold, anything in between, they are out there. One of the things that has become very popular are what we call the encore, or sometimes called bloomathon azaleas. One of the kind of drawbacks some people might criticize or say about azaleas is like, oh, they're so beautiful when they flower. What's that? 5, 10 days in spring and then it's all over. So with this idea in mind, the growers developed some that will bloom for us in spring and also bloom for us in fall. So that kind of gives us an extended bloom season, which entices a lot of people into growing these. Their care, their management, their placement, you can see is all the same. They're growing kind of in this understory environment, well-drained conditions, part sun, part shade, this there. The way these guys work is azaleas, they set their flower buds in late summer. And then some of them, a few of them open for us in the fall, say, October, maybe going into November. And then the rest of them go through the winter and then open for us in spring. In this case, I'm saying in May. So this is the way that we get those 2 seasons of bloom out of it. Again, there's every color that's imaginable out there. I don't even know the exact variety on this. It's just taken out of a public area, but I was able to get the 2 seasons of bloom in there. So if that's something that appeals to you, having the kind of 2 seasons of interest, you can get fuchsia, red, pink, whites out there. These guys, a lot of these encore and bloomathon azaleas, they're also more sun tolerant. So that's something to think about also if you want to grow azaleas in a sunnier, warmer location. Sometimes these varieties do a little bit better. I think they were developed, if I remember, down in Louisiana or Mississippi originally. And as they continue to develop over the last 20 plus years, their cold hardiness has improved. We have very good success with them in here. But like I said, if you want to grow an azalea but feel like it's kind of a hot, sunny area, maybe that's a really good direction for you to go. Now, we were talking about looking at some of the different hybrids that are out there and some of the evergreen azaleas. There are also deciduous azaleas, including we have several native species that are in here. I would say really my number 1 favorite azalea, if I had it, I don't in my garden, but I love is this Pinkster bloom azalea. Thing that I love about the Pinkster bloom azalea, it's a native, Virginia native here throughout the mountainous regions and everything, but it has a really nice fragrance to it. Not something that will stop traffic, but if you're walking along and this is in full bloom, the fragrance is very sweet, nice, and it will draw you over there. They bloom a little bit later and the flowers are more delicate. They're not as prolific, kind of not quite in your face, but back when I was living in Fauquier County, I was fortunate enough, these were like living throughout the forest and the environment I was at. I could just walk and these would be blooming in the woods. So that's a Pinkster bloom. We also have some, I think, Atlanticum azaleas and stuff. So the native varieties are out there, but a lot of these native varieties also shed their leaves, but they're absolutely beautiful in their own right. And like Roseum is another one that's got nice fragrance in there. So I really, really think they have a place in a more naturalized landscape. Some of these deciduous azaleas have also been hybridized. So that's where you see the Exbury azalea, or sometimes called a Mollis azalea. Kind of an old-fashioned plant. You don't see a whole lot of them because they get quite large and can almost get what I'm going to use this word rangy. I don't mean that in a bad way, but that yellow flowered one that you see there, that's probably easily 10 foot tall. That one that's in the picture to give you an idea of the scale on. I think one of the things that makes these plants so appealing is really the vibrant colors you can get out of this. So we start getting the yellows, the oranges in there. Really just eye-catching colors. And again, I think in a naturalized environment where the size of the plant a little more open, less compact growth habit, if you can accommodate that, is a really nice addition to the landscape. They also flower a little bit later in the season, more towards May, maybe even into June time period. But if you're looking for that kind of color and impact and you have the space for it, you definitely want to check those out as well. So this just kind of give you a little introduction to sort of what's out there. Even though, like I said, those are ones that shed their leaves, the evergreen ones also will take on a little bit of a fall coloration and will shed some of their leaves. I've noticed particularly like the white varieties and the lavender varieties will often shed even sometimes up to 90% of their foliage. So this looks like one of those where all these yellow leaves are in here. Eventually those leaves will yellow, they'll drop off, but they'll keep a little tuft of green foliage at their tips throughout the winter. And then we composed this where we took several varieties, put them together to give you an idea of the range of coloration you get even this fall. So sometimes with our evergreens, we don't even consider this. It's not a part of the thought process that goes into it. I weigh all this, when I'm looking at which I like to use. There are varieties, there's a whole series which you call Gerard azaleas. These might be Gerard fuchsia, Gerard pink, Gerard red, so on this area. Those are ones for they have better foliage retention in the winter if that's an important value for you, kind of intermediate in size. So we'll help you with all this. We're not expecting you to remember, but you come in, we have all these different series and varieties, and there's no such thing as one being better than the other. You get single flower, double flowered. It's really just finding the ones that sort of you like most. So we talked a little bit about the selection, the care, how to site them. I want to switch gears now, talk a little bit about how to care for them. And I've got a video that will talk to us a little bit about how to prune them, care for them, fertilize them, and keep them looking nice in your garden.
Hi, I'm here to share some tips with you on how to keep your azaleas and rhododendrons looking terrific. As soon as they finish blooming, this is the ideal time to go in and prune and fertilize them. But before we start cutting, we need to set some goals and objectives of why we are pruning them. So this plant that we're looking at today is in good health, but it's gotten a little bit overgrown and it's a little bit misshaped. So I'm going to go in and use a technique that I call selective thinning. By reaching down inside the plant and taking selective branches out, it helps to retain the natural form and shape of the plant. I target my cuts to cut where that branch naturally divides or forks. That helps with the plant and the healing process from the pruning, as well as maintaining the natural shape. So when we've completed, you look at this and realize I've reduced the size by about 25%, but it still looks like an azalea. Now, azaleas respond really well to pruning, and you can be as vigorous as you want. You can prune them back to almost any height or shape you need. But with rhododendrons, they're close relatives, I have to be a little more stingy with them. I don't like to cut back in the old growth. So I go in, deadhead it, pull off the old spent flower blooms just to make it look prettier, and then, again, do a little bit of selective thinning out the tips of the branch to maintain that density. Once we've completed our pruning, this is also the ideal time to fertilize them. I'm using Merrifield Flowering Plant Food, which will help encourage good, healthy growth, set flower buds later this summer, and reward us with gorgeous blooms next spring.
Great. Again, we want to hear from you. So if you have any kind of questions, comments, please put those in the chat box for us now. Also, I was looking at that video. We made that a few years ago, and we had our Merrifield Flowering Plant Food in small jugs. That's no longer available. All we have is 20-pound bags. But I did want to show you, this is a Azalea Camellia Rhododendron fertilizer. It's made from a company called Fertilome. If you're just looking for a small bag, I'd say this is an excellent choice that's out there. It's it got the phosphorus in there that helps promote flowering, but also these different fertilizer sources, when you look at it, it also tends to make the soil more acidic because all the plants in this family also like acidic soils. And that's naturally what we have in this area. So again, that's one of the reasons they thrive so well for us. But looking ahead, after the flowering is done, if you want to do some pruning, fertilizing, that's the time to do it. We've got several good options for you as far as the fertilizer goes. Now, any questions coming in, Kristen, at this point in time?
Yes, actually, one of the questions is regarding fertilizing, and should it be done every year?
I'm going to say not absolutely. So again, the question doesn't need to be fertilized every year. It's a good practice, but not required. A lot of this you can make based on just looking at the plant and evaluating. If it has good color, it has a normal growth rate and is blooming, then we can assume this and got balanced nutrients and fertilizer is not necessary. I always say this is like sort of giving a vitamin pill. If you want to fertilize it, it can improve their color, their flowering, but it's generally it's not a life and death decision. I even noticed like on this bag, I'm going on a little bit, but they instruct you to fertilize 3 times a year. I'm going to say that's pretty extreme. If you had like this little plant and you just wanted to push it to grow, 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 and you kept up with the watering as well, you know, that would be kind of a very high rate. An older plant that we're just trying to maintain and keep it in good shape, maybe only fertilize it once every 2 or 3 years, and that's ample.
Wonderful.
Anything else for us?
Another question is, one is, when do encores set their blooms?
So they set their blooms at the same time as other azaleas. And this was, I spent a couple years watching them and testing and figure all this out and stuff, because when they were first introduced, they were called repeat bloomers. And a lot of times in the trade, we're told, oh, repeat bloom. Like to me, a rose is a repeat bloomer. A rose, it blossoms, I prune it back, it grows, and it blossoms again. That is not how these azaleas work. With our azaleas, all of them basically produce their flower buds in August. So I want to have my pruning done really no later than the 1st of July. That says if I'm doing my pruning in May and June, then they have July and several weeks in August to recover and still set buds. So my sort of deadline on pruning is sometime after flowering, but before the 4th of July. And that doesn't matter whether it's an encore or just a traditional spring bloomer.
Great. And then I have a question related to pruning. For a 10-year-old rhododendron, can some of the inner, thicker branches be trimmed back to try to fill in growth?
I feel like there's always a risk with that. I'm not telling you no, that you can't do it, but I've seen this go both directions. I've seen old rhododendrons where we prune back into the old woody growth and boom, they prop right back out and look full and great. I've also seen them where they don't pop back out. So I don't like to do that, but there are times when you just have to accept, well, there's a certain amount of risk in there, but I don't like the way it is. It's blocking my view, whatever the situation is. And I would say, yes, you can prune them back into the old wood, but no real guarantees on exactly how that plant's going to respond. In general terms, the healthier and the more vigorous the plant is before pruning, the healthier and more vigorous it will respond to it. But that's where I'd rather, with our plants, try to maintain them. And this is like the ideal world. I'd be maintaining it with annual pruning so that I don't find myself in that situation. Again, azaleas, I don't have any trouble at all. The rhododendrons, there's a little bit of a risk on that.
Fantastic. The other question is that there's a person with a very large rhododendron that's very tall and leggy, and their arborist told them it has a disease of which they don't remember the name, but he advised rejuvenation. I forget how far down he said to prune it and how far down it can safely go, with a PS that it's about 12 feet tall.
Yeah, so, and we're going to talk about diseases in just a couple seconds here coming up. I'm making a guess. Again, this is all guesswork, but he probably is talking about a canker disease, which then gets a fungal infection that gets into the stem. And the only way you can treat that is to prune it out. There is no plan B on that. So in this situation, if I'm reading it correctly, it might be your only choice. It's either, hey, we just do this renewal pruning and see how the plant responds, because otherwise it's kind of going to eventually die of this disease. So that's when you're in that situation, it might be your best option that's there. And this one is saying where I have seen them cut all the way down to the ground. I used to, I don't even like sharing this story, but I will. We're all friends that's out there. We all know better that we do not go out into the woods and the forest and dig plants out of the forest. That's a horrible thing to do. But if I go way back, even when I was working my way through college, I didn't do that, but I was sometimes buying plants that I could tell had been wild dug like that. And what they would do is exactly what we're talking about here. Cut them back to a stump, get them to regenerate, and then those that came through would be dug and brought out for commerce and commercial sale and stuff again. I'm talking about 40 years ago. Hopefully none of that practice takes place. Anyway, I'm digressing again. The bottom line is, coming out of that experience, I would see some of them responded really well and came back as full bushy plants. Some didn't. It's almost like a 50-50 chance, but I think it might be the best option that you have available to you. All right, any other questions? Do we want to move on to sort of the diseases and pest management stuff?
I'm going to go rapid fire through 3 because they're kind of interrelated. 1, because they like moist. How often should you water? Which I know that's a long answer. We discuss watering all the time. Pine needle mulch, good or bad? What's your opinion? And a 10-year-old rhododendron that has only ever had a few flowers, but they've not been fertilizing, and it gets late afternoon sun. I know they're sort of related.
Right. So a new plant is very, very different as far as watering requirements. And that's what thing that happens a lot, like with Kristen and I, because we're, as a retail provider, a new plant you're getting has a little small restricted root zone. It might have a pot like this size. This can dry out very quickly. So with a new plant, we're saying it's important we water directly on that root ball. We saturate it thoroughly till it's just like soaking wet. And then we'll go back and check on it like every 4 or 5 days. That doesn't mean water every 4 to 5 days. That means we check on it. When that begins to feel dry, that's the time that we water it again. So overwatering really means I'm watering too frequently. And this is really important with azaleas, and even more important with some of the other plants we're talking about, like mountain laurels and rhododendrons. We never want them to go completely dry. At any one watering time, we want you to saturate it, but then leave it alone until it gets that almost dry place. If you are constantly saturating it, these plants, like we've already mentioned, are prone to root rot. So it's allowing it time to become almost but not completely dry between. After it's had a year or 2 to get roots established, instead of this root system, now it has this root system. They can be surprisingly drought tolerant. And actually we have more trouble with them on the other end of the spectrum. If it's wet, poorly drained, we're not getting that aeration in the soil, then we start to get the root problems. So new plants, I'm going to say check on them at least once every 4 or 5 days. If it's a well-established plant that's been in the ground 2-3 years, hey, check on them at least like once a month. I mean, it really can be that extreme that's in there. I love the pine needle mulch. It works great. It looks beautiful around rhododendrons, azaleas, because you see a lot of these in southern gardens. You go down towards Georgia, South Carolina. The pine needles stay loose. They're well drained, last a long time. All good things on pine needles. It's just for us, they're not as readily available. We sell them, but I believe they actually do have to bring them and ship them up from like areas like Georgia. So they come at a little bit more cost, but if it's practical for you, go for it. And the one that's not blooming well, I'll say 2 things. One, I usually find it's a lack of sunlight. That's, if it's growing in a really dense canopy under mature trees, it may be limited by getting enough sunlight in there. We want to get at least about 2 or 3 hours of sun on there to get some decent flowering out of it. If it's getting good sunlight, otherwise looks healthy, then yeah, let's go ahead and fertilize it this spring, but that's trying to get it set up for next year. Because again, the blooming decision is made. Just like you might be able to see in here, this big rhododendron, those buds are already on there, and that bud, hidden there, but those buds were formed last year. So if you have buds on there now, you're in good shape. If you don't, hey, let's go ahead and fertilize it. Maybe you can take some competing growth out, make sure it gets some decent sun and see how that works. So with that, I'm going to move on because I got a bunch of other stuff here and I can see our time is going by. So we'll just go to our next slide. If you remember the azalea that we showed in the video, the pruning video, I wanted to show you the after image on that. So this is that same azalea the following spring. So you can see how it responded to the pruning. It gave it time. So if we did the pruning, we said in May, it pops back out, fills in, it sets its buds, and then this is how it looked the following spring. So mission accomplished. I like, again, that selective hand thinning it's on there. It has a much more naturalized look. I think it's better for the plants. People will shear these, where you go out with hedge clippers, and we do that because it's quick, it's easy, it's convenient. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but you compromise a little bit on the convenience. You take away sort of the open natural form of the plant if you start shearing them. Because this is our virtual plant clinic, I wanted to talk about some of the pest issues that you might encounter on them. Probably the most common insect pest that we're going to run into on this is called the azalea lace bug. You can't really see here, but on the underside of the leaves, like if you could see like this little spot here, that is actually an azalea lace bug. These insects, what they do, they're on the underside of the leaf. They poke it with their mouth. It's like a little syringe, and they're poking it in there, and they're sucking sap out of the plant. As they suck and draw the sap out of the leaf tissue, it starts to take on this stippled, kind of bleached out look that's in there. So the classic symptoms are you'll start to see your azalea just losing all the color, this kind of bleached out look. You flip the leaf over, and on the underside, this is all their fecal matter that's in there. Some of those are the actual insects are there. And the good news is this is relatively easy to treat. We also have 3 generations a year. So if they hatch out, let's say in late April or May, and then they have babies, and then their babies have babies. So these populations build up throughout the summer. If you get to a situation where it's causing enough damage to justify treatment, then we want to either spray that or drench it with a systemic insecticide, because that gets absorbed into the leaf tissue and kills them as they're feeding. So it's an easy pest to manage. It tends to occur more frequently in harsh environments. So if your azalea is sitting out, in a parking lot with no shade, no shelter, not part of a diverse landscape, that's where they are most likely problematic. If this plant is sited in more of a woodsy environment, more naturalized condition, they have natural predators, and generally the problems don't get quite that out of hand. So that's an insect. I do always invite you to bring samples into our plant clinic for confirmation and diagnosis, because occasionally we'll also get spider mites, and the damage can look very similar, even though they're different pests and they would have different control recommendations. So it's always good to go for confirmation on there. Switching gears a little bit here on diseases. This is a disease, a pathogen that affects the flowers. It doesn't really hurt the plant. It's not a health issue on the plant. It's really more of a cosmetic, aesthetic issue. And it's on almost every azalea throughout the whole region. You just hardly can dodge this. But I'm sure you've seen this. Your azalea was looking beautiful and gorgeous one day, and then you come out and they're all brown and mushy and hanging on the plants like that. A lot of times we just want to dismiss that and say, oh, that's just the rain. It's the rain. It's partially the rain because that provides some moisture, but what's really doing is triggering a disease called ovulinia petal blight. If you look really close and you can actually see these little black dots, then you can see them on the old blooms. That is actually the pathogen that's there. They form these kind of little, I call this little nuggets. It's called a sclerotia, and that's how they persist and overwinter that's in there. So if you have the patience to do this, and I've done this with good results many times, because I only have 3 azaleas, right? I got a small garden. Or that plant that we did in the pruning video, one of the reasons it came out so nice is because we went through and pulled all these little blooms off. All these little spent flowers, we took the time to go through, fastidiously pick them off, put them in the trash, and by doing that, I was collecting all these little fungal bodies and putting them out in the trash. So just cultural practices like that can take you a long way to managing this particular disease, and it extends the bloom life on your plants, and you get a little more enjoyment out of it. If you have a large garden, that's just not going to be possible. We can spray the buds with a fungicide right as they're starting to crack, almost about now, this time of year. If you look at it and you're just starting to see a little hint of color in those buds, that's the time you would treat this, and it will extend the beauty. It will extend the bloom life on your plants. Again, this isn't a plant health issue, but it's a way that you might get more enjoyment out of it or a longer bloom season with them. The one that really is kind of scary that you can't see but actually kills plants is this pathogen called Phytophthora. You hear me talk about it all the time because it infects over about 1,000 different plant species. So it hits everything from tomatoes and potatoes to boxwoods and rhododendrons. Within the heath family, there's several plants that are quite sensitive to this. The most sensitive to it, I'm going to say from what I've seen, is the mountain laurel, which we'll be showing next, then the rhododendron, and to a lesser degree than we might start to see it in azaleas. So they vary in their susceptibility to it. But this is what's called, it's a water mold. It's a pathogen that moves and it spreads and infects plants through water that's held in the soil. So this takes me back to the importance of having good drainage that's in there, and of not siting these in kind of wet locations or dense heavy clay. That's where it gets into the stem tissue. And we're trying to show here where this kind of chocolate brown discoloration is. The pathogen, the Phytophthora, has gotten in here. It's killed this vascular tissue. The healthy stuff's supposed to look white. This browning has been killed by this water mold. And your plant, here's a rhododendron, the plant looks like it's thirsty, like it's wilting, like it's drying. And so the natural normal response is to water, but if it doesn't perk up, we may be dealing with this kind of a disease problem. If we catch it very early in the game, we do have some treatments that are available for you. But if it goes beyond, let's say I'm starting to get 20, 30% dieback, that plant's usually checking out and not going to be salvaged. So our first thing is, again, when planting these, making sure with rhododendrons and mountain laurels and stuff, I want to make sure that soil is well conditioned so it has good drainage, good aeration. Keep the plants up elevated a little bit out of the ground to ensure that we have that good drainage. On a new plant, we really don't want it to ever dry out. So again, you have to keep an eye on the watering, but make sure that I check the soil, and set up a reasonable watering schedule based on the conditions that's there. When you see them in the wild, like this is the Kalmia latifolia, mountain laurel we're talking about, it's in the same family but different plant. You often find them in these kind of dry woodland areas. This picture I took out near Burke Lake, giving you an idea. So these are native plants. They're indigenous to our area. They're beautiful when they flower, but like I said, in the landscape, we want to make sure that we keep them almost in a slightly dry, or here's kind of dry woodland area. Once they're established and they have those roots out there, they're surprisingly drought tolerant. So again, they're evergreen. When the flowers open, absolutely spectacular like this. There's a couple different colors. You can kind of go a pink, reddish look on there. I think we have to be really careful on that group of plants in terms of making sure we have the drainage and the watering that's there. Still saying in the heath family, same family, the Paris japonica. This is a Japanese Andromeda, obviously a non-native member of the plant, of the heath family that's there. Get familiar with it. I kind of put these slides a little bit by their flower shape. If you saw the rhododendrons, the azaleas, the mountain laurels, they all kind of look like a little bell shape that's in there. Here we kind of say that flower is starting to close in on itself, turns into where it looks almost like a little bit of an urn. With Pierce japonica, many varieties that's in there. This little one that I have on the desk with me, this is a variety called Prelude. Stays, I don't know, maybe 2 feet tall, 2 feet wide. The one that you see here with the dark burgundy foliage on there coming up, I'm trying to remember, that's either like Mountain Fire or that might even be, I'm spacing out, I want to say Katsura, but a new growth on there. So these leaves come out sort of this burgundy red color, and then they mature to a green. So I really like this plant because, hey, I've got a nice formed evergreen shrub, flowers for us in the 1st of April, new growth comes on, it adds interest. So again, I'm always looking for these plants that kind of have a seasonal change and give it a little more interest than just looking at a week or two of flowers that's in there. So again, these can go anywhere from little small ones to big ones that are there. All right, so we start to see the similarity in the flowers that's on there. This again, a Virginia native that's out here. Sourwood, this is how we say it's a deciduous tree. It's really the only member of this genus. It's kind of unique in that respect in the plant kingdom that's there. Again, like members of the heath family, you see how the flower looks identical to what you might find on that Paris japonica. Nice little urn shape in the tassels out there. So it gives us blooms. Famous, world famous for the honey that's produced from this, because again, the honey comes out with such a distinctive flavor that's on there. This gives you a look at what the tree looks like, and the fall color can be breathtaking. I rarely put this into my slide presentations because this is kind of a fussy tree. Even though it's native to our areas, it's not sited just ideally. And it also is kind of notorious for not always being the most reliable as far as transplanting goes. If you don't have the ideal conditions, this is not a foolproof tree for us. So a lot of people get their heart set on it, and they're so wonderful. We love to have native trees, so we have them. We have them available for purchase and sale. And I don't want to turn you away from it, but it's really, you need to be a gardener with this one. You need to sort of be attentive to it, take care of it. If you have the patience, I'd really like to get you a little small one in a container and let it grow, but it's also not the fastest growing. So that's sourwood, really wonderful tree for all seasons. Fits, checks off so many boxes for us. They'll grow up, 25, 35 feet tall if you live long enough to see all that, but wonderful little specimen tree. Another one that's kind of under the radar, I say, very few people use this in the landscape. It's the Echinanthus. You can see, again, member of the same family, the heath family. We're looking for that similarity in the flower shape and form. And you can see how it gets its name, because it's really, this is not a showstopper, but when you go up to look at it, it's got a lot of interest that's in there. And then you see it here with the fall coloration. That's where people suddenly stop to look at and say, what's that? So this is red vein Echinanthus. This is an old specimen that you're seeing in the picture that's that big. It probably took 20 years, 15, 20 years to get this size. Almost think back, we showed that picture of that Exbury azalea. They get quite large. They get this kind of open look to it, great naturalized environment. I love the flowers in the spring, the fall foliage in there, very sturdy, reliable plant. I should have checked to make sure we have them in stock, because sometimes that's a little bit of hit or miss on there. But if you've got the space and a place you want to put something unique and different in there, that I think is one that really merits looking at, but rarely it's seen in landscapes. So that gives you something to diversify with. One last thing I'm going to show you and talk about, and then we're going to go back to our phone calls. Gotta talk about blueberries, right? Same plant family. You can look at this. I'm always putting my little botany stuff in there because that's what makes it fun. Look at these. Oh, maybe I can get them in there. If you can look at the flower shape on there. The flower shape on this is pretty much identical to what we have in the Pierce japonica, identical to what you saw on the sourwood that's there. This is how we start to see the commonality between these plants. So all these plants we've looked at today are like that, well-drained conditions, acidic soils, will go kind of from a full sun to part shade environment. So they have very similar kind of growing conditions. And again, if you're trying to grow fruit here in the mid-Atlantic kind of Virginia area, blueberries are one of the easiest, most rewarding, most reliable plants that you could possibly have in your garden. So I have, I'm just started playing around with them. I have 3 blueberries. Again, I'm in a little townhouse. I don't have a big, extensive backyard, but I had to make room to put 3 blueberries in there. They are self-pollinating, but they do much, much, much better if you can get cross-pollination between 2 of the same or different plants that are in there. You can get early, mid-season, and late producing varieties that's in there. And also, many of them will go a very bright red coloration in the fall. So the fall coloration can vary. So there's been lots and lots of hybridization in here, lots of selection, different cultivars. One of the best things I think has happened to us really over the past 10 years or so is there's varieties that have been developed for smaller gardens, for container grown use. So if you look at this particular one that they call bushel and berry, this is a series of several different varieties. This one I think they call jelly bean, which will stay more compact. So even if you have a deck or a patio and you won't put it in a large container, or if you're in a small garden area, townhouse or something like that, these are varieties that you can grow in that condition. There's some, I think there's one they call pink lemonade where the fruit comes out kind of a pink color. So all this has been done to make it easier for you and add interest to it. I think it's Duke is a variety here over my shoulder. So that one's been developed for large fruit that's in there. But if you want to grow fruit, grow blueberries. The biggest challenge, quite honestly, is I don't really get blueberries. It's mostly going to the wildlife that's out there because I'm not going to put the trouble into trying to protect it and fight the birds for it. I figure it's out here for all of us to share. If I get a handful and the birds get the rest, I'm really okay with that. But easy plants to grow, do well environment, and fantastic for both wildlife and maybe you'll get a handful as well. Hey, so that's kind of what I had to show right here today. Let me go back to the questions and see if there's anything else you can discuss about this amazing group of plants.
Sure. I have a question from Paul, and he was wondering if all of the information we've just discussed generally applies to camellias as well.
Generally, yes, and I thought about it, but camellias are in a different family. They're in the tea family, so I love camellias, and the answer is yes, but that's why they were excluded today.
Fantastic. And then a lot of questions have come in about winter damage over this past winter and what will happen to azaleas due to this latest frost that just happened.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a wait and see thing. We've had, you're right, lots and lots of winter damage. Most of what I have seen, pretty much everything I've seen is what I call damage, not dead. So what I'm asking everybody to do is just to kind of be patient, allow some time. And what I've been seeing is plants where the foliage was browned and injured, but gradually over the period of the next few weeks, what I expect to happen is some of that old damaged foliage is going to slough off. It will just brown and drop to the ground. New foliage will come out to replace it. The real question is going to be if the flower buds were damaged or not. Because particularly some of like the Bloomathon Encore ones, they're not quite as reliably cold hardy. And if the flower buds got killed, then the plants are going to survive, but you may not be impressed with the flowers this year. When you start to see new growth, which I'm hoping is really literally within the next couple of weeks and everything, at that point in time, you can make some decisions. If you have portions of the plant, some dead branches or something, that can be pruned out. You could fertilize the plants to kind of enhance their recovery that's in there, but it's definitely kind of a wait and see thing. I really think it's just going to be a little bit of damage. I don't think we're going to see anything that kills plants, and I'm hoping it really doesn't even impact the flowering on them.
Fantastic. This is more of a do we have in stock question. Do we have lilacs? And if you don't know that answer, feel free to call the store and we're more than happy to reach out to Trees and Shrubs and get that response.
Yeah, it's always better because if you're asking about like lilac colored azaleas, I think the answer is yes. If you're asking about lilac shrubs, the answer is yes. But what will happen is I always say check first. We have 3 different stores. The inventory can vary between those stores. And as soon as I could be standing here saying yes, and I could have somebody outside that's buying them all. So I'm going to put that as a qualified yes.
Yes. And then the same answer I think would apply to whether we have, and I apologize, I never took Latin. So it's Peris, Peris.
Yes.
That would be the same answer. And
we have a great select. I mean, now again, I work at the Fair Oaks store, but I'm sure this is true for everybody because like even this little one is like a brand new delivery, just came in off the truck. and we have hundreds of them in stock, different varieties, shapes, and sizes. So that I feel very confident on saying yes.
Fantastic. And then one last question's come through. Oh, two. Her mountain laurel has some brown spots and the wood is touching the ground.
Yeah. So two things. One I want to say is just to follow up that last question is, you don't have any idea we go through when it was like when they were calling for it, it was going to drop down below freezing. We spent the entire day kind of all hands on deck. We're taking hundreds, if not thousands of plants that we have in the nursery, putting them on carts and shelves, rolling them into the store, into the warehouse, sheltering them overnight, only to bring them all back out the next day. So that's how what we need to do to try to make sure that you still get plants that are beautiful and shelter from that damage. Hey, there's a couple things that may not have made into cover, but that's the kind of thing that's just what we need to do, and so we take care of it. So we put that kind of effort into it. On the mountain laurel, they are very frequently, they get a leaf spot disease, a fungal leaf spot. It's called Cercospora. I think that is probably what you're looking at, and it really doesn't matter that it's in contact with the ground. Those are spores that are dispersed in the wind and the air. Most of the time, I don't even bother treating it because it's just spots and blemishes. If it's getting to a point where it's really detracting from the appearance and quality of the plant, then you can treat it with a fungicide, but that would all be something you start spraying immediately after the flowering. So it's nothing that you would necessarily do today. And that means it gives you time to send us pictures or bring us samples in. And then if you want to intervene and try to prevent that from spreading, we can talk to you about treatment options that you'd have that begin when it's done flowering.
All right. And then the last question I have is, again, I'm going to call it sourwood. What is the ideal site for it? And she has the Latin name here, or they, sorry.
Yeah. So they like some sort of, again, that acidic, moist, well-drained condition. They will go in full sun, but I think this is going to sound kind of strange, but a little bit sheltered or buffered from temperature extremes, like where I've seen this. This is what drives me crazy about plants sometimes. You can go driving down Interstate 81 and you start getting down into the southern part of Virginia, and you see sourwoods growing out of the embankments of rock cuts along Interstate 81. If you happen to hit it in the fall, they're just lit up bright red. And it's like, there it is, gorgeous plant. The ones that I showed in the pictures there, that's just growing in the middle of a cemetery, totally neglected. So you'll see them growing in these kind of harsh environments, but I think the biggest issue is sometimes it's with their ability to transplant them. It's a matter of getting them from a nursery production to getting their roots established in the ground. So yeah, as far as when you're doing this, I want that moist, well-drained, kind of acidic conditions of getting at least 4 to 5 hours of sun, and it can go into brighter environments. But I think if you can, I'd like to start young so it has you better transplant success, but they're slow growing, so that will also give you need to have some patience to allow it time to develop some structure to it.
Fantastic. We're currently at 2:53. David, do you have time for one more question?
I do if you do.
All right.
You're the boss now. This might be your first day on the show, but means you're the boss.
Fantastic. So this is a combo question again. It's how do you ameliorate clay soil when planting new azaleas, camellias, and rhododendrons? And the other part of the question is leaf mulch beneficial? So I think they.
So I'd like to recommend our Merrifield planting mix. So here's the deal. Clay is not really bad. Clay has a lot of good qualities as far as it holds a lot of nutrients. It can hold a lot of water. It's just the density and the compactness of it. So I do think it's important that we mix some organic material in there. And the organic conditioner is there really to enhance the structure of the soil, to break up the clay for better air and water penetration into that. Our planting mix is kind of a premium blend where we've taken, it's like things like mushroom compost, aged bark. There's even a little bit of nutrient supplement that's in there, and we kind of blended these together. And so that's a very good product to use. If you prefer using like a leaf mulch, all about it. The idea is to get some kind of organic material into the soil. It's just that what we're selling to you is kind of a premium product. It's going to have more diverse ingredients, a little higher nutrient content that's in it. So it's going to give us a little better results as a result. But if like you're looking at, because hey, if you've got leaf mold available to you, then that's really excellent. This came up in a class I was just in last night. There's always some debates about, you know, amending the soil or not. Some you see do and don't, and so on. In the perfect world, which we don't have, I don't really like to dig planting holes. I like to prepare planting beds, because some of the controversy about this is if I dig a little small hole and it's a richly conditioned soil, then the roots and the plant kind of stays in that little small hole. So what I prefer to do, and this doesn't work in real life, I get that, but I generally want to amend the entire planting bed before I start getting involved. If you're not able to do that, I'm just going to say the wider the hole, the better we can do. But I am a strong believer in getting some kind of compost in there to feed the soil, to enhance the drainage, like we talked about in detail with at our last plant clinic. So yeah, our planting mix, if you want to use like a leaf mold, like leaf growth, that's fine. It's what you have available.
Wonderful. I want to thank everyone for attending, and David, again, for a wonderful presentation. The recording of this will be available tomorrow in about 24 hours. Feel free, if you still have additional questions, to call us at any of our locations. We have a plant clinic that's staffed during all the hours the stores are open. We also, on our website, have a contact us. And I sometimes help when answering those questions as well. And we will route them to the appropriate person to get the correct answer, or answer it directly if it's a plant availability. But as David said, we'll say yes, and somebody might be buying it. So we do our very best. And that is everything. Thank you so much for attending today. Truly appreciate it. And look forward to next week's.
All right, everybody. Come visit us at the store. Say hi to me. Say hi to Kristen. If you can't see her behind the screens, Amanda's there. Say hi to Amanda also. Okay. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank you.